Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators from Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, I hope you had a great Halloween. And I want you to think back a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, when we talked about parts of plants. And we talked about how all plants have things called seeds. And those seeds are what's responsible for growing new plants. Well, scientists, seeds don't just get up and walk around and plant themselves. Seeds and plants need help from different organisms like insects and animals around them, or even things like the wind and the weather, to help spread and scatter those seeds so that we can have new plants. If you've ever driven along the highway, or you've been able to be in like a forest area and you've seen like a tree, it looks like a tree, it's like a baby tree, but you can tell that it clearly hasn't been planted, right? Like there's not like the mound of dirt at the bottom of it, it's just growing out of the ground, but it doesn't look very old. Well, chances are that a seed landed in that spot either by an animal or by the wind. Scientists, it's really important that animals help out to spread plant seeds, and also that the wind helps to carry seeds as well. I'm sure on a windy day you've all seen leaves that blow by, or those little seeds that float in the air, right, that spin in a circle, and you've seen those spread. Those are all just different ways that seeds are dispersed or moved around to plant new plants. Now scientists, I'm going to read a book to you today, and that book is called Flip, Float, and Fly. And this book is all about seeds on the move. It's about different ways that plant seeds are spread throughout the world. Now, in some ecosystems, scientists, like in Africa, the elephants, for example, elephants are one of the number one reasons that seeds in different plants are dispersed or spread out. Elephants will eat fruits or different plants, and they'll digest those foods and those seeds come out the other end, right? And so every time they drop their undigested food, then those seeds can start to grow where they're at. So that's kind of cool. Elephants are a huge spreader of seeds. So scientists, let's read our book today and let's learn about different ways that seeds from plants are spread on Earth. Flip, Float, Fly, Seeds on the Move by Joanne Early Mackin. Take a breath and blow on a fuzzy dandelion. Whee! One puff sends seeds soaring like small soft feathers. They parachute into the sky. Have you ever done that to a dandelion and you see all those seeds go? Usually somebody's like, don't do that. Maple seeds whirl and twirl in a breeze. Flip, flutter, float. The wind lifts them up and off the tree. Away they fly like shiny green helicopters, spinning and spinning. Now scientists, you may notice that these seeds look kind of like birds or kind of like a helicopter. They have these parts to them that allow them to move through the air as they come off the tree. Tumbleweed plants grow as round as globes. In autumn, their stems snap off. On a flat, open prairie, they roll, 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 sprinkling their seeds as they tumble. So you can see the little brown dots are seeds, and those seeds are just left in different places. Basswood tree fruit clusters twist in the wind, dangle and dance. In winter they drop, like sailboats they glide, on a smooth, slick snow. So you can see those seeds that are up here in the tree. And those seeds fall. There's some deer down here, so those deer may be helping spread those seeds just like the wind. Locust tree pods look like long brown smiles. They dry, split open, and curl apart. Carrying seeds, each side scoots along, sliding on slippery ice. Skitter and skate. Seeds bump off along the way. So for a locust tree, you see that these pods slit open, and then out tumble the seeds. Where water flows, it can carry seeds. Even a raindrop can wash tiny seeds away. Splash, swoosh, splatter, scatter. You can see a seed in the water coming off this flower. The air inside a coconut helps it float. Bounce, plop. It drops into the ocean and drifts away on the waves. So you can see the coconut. You can see inside, see that coconut seed. Some seeds move on their own. Poke a touch-me-not, seed pod and fall. Pop, fling, the pod explodes, the seeds are flung. So you can see here there's butterflies and there's birds and they're all around these touch-me-not flowers. And you can see I'm gonna make an inference that this insect touched the pod and it broke open, scattering those seeds. So not just the wind or the water helps to spread seeds, but different organisms like insects and birds and butterflies, they also help to spread seeds. A wild oat seed curls up in the sun like a comma. The seed straightens out when it rains, wiggle, jump. One way, then the other. It works its way into the ground. So you've got some more. You can see some mice here that might be helping to break those seeds off the plants. Animals move seeds around too. A bat finds a feast in a fig tree and wings away with the seeds inside. The seeds pass through its body unharmed and fall to the ground in its droppings. So you can see here's what a fig looks like on the outside, and then on the inside of that fig you'll see all sorts of seeds. So as the bats fly, you can see they're dropping the seeds. A squirrel scurries to gather up acorns and bury them to eat later. But does it use all the food it collects? No! Lost acorns can grow into strong, shady oak trees. Burdock seeds stick to sleeves and socks. They cling to feathers and fur. We carry them as we hike through the wilds and drop them off in new places. Now, scientists, you may have heard these called as stickers before, but they're little seeds that cling onto fabric, or they cling onto an animal's fur. You can see the bird's got one in its wing. And then as those animals move through where they live in their ecosystem, those seeds start to fall off and a new plant can grow. People buy seeds from garden shops. Friends and neighbors trade them and share. Plants and seeds travel on ships, trains, and airplanes. Seeds on the move zoom over the oceans, across cities and countries around the world. People plant seeds in gardens and flower pots. They tend the seedlings and watch them grow. Sprouts, shoots, leaves, and roots. Flowers bloom and new seeds form, beginning the cycle again. And scientists, here's just a little picture of some different plants. We have a seed pod that shows that a fruit that holds many seeds which are dispersed, and then the seed pod dries and splits open. Here's a picture of a seed. Then we have fruit. So fruit is a part of the plant that holds the seeds. So anytime you eat a fruit or vegetable, you'll notice that there's seeds inside. And those seeds are what we use to grow new plants. And like the bats had eaten the seeds of the figs, and how the squirrels or the rabbits, right, they spread the seeds. You'll see nuts. Nuts are a type of seed with a hard shell. So here's these peanuts. The peanut is a seed. And then scientists, this is similar to the picture that I've shown you in the past. You have the parts of the plant. Up here are the flower. And it's part of the plant that's going to produce those seeds. And they're often in brightly colored like we had talked about. And that attracts those animals, those insects, different things that can help spread those seeds around the environment. So scientists, there are lots and lots of ways that we can spread seeds. It's not just wind, it's not just water, it's not just animals or insects, but humans as well. There are lots and lots of different types of plants that we can plant here in Kansas City that aren't native to Kansas City, meaning they're not originally from here. They're from different parts of the world, but we're able to grow them. And so that's really interesting that we can have different plants from all over the world growing in different places. And it's all about the movement of seeds. So again, with seed dispersal, when we have new plants growing in the wild, we have animals that can transfer those seeds, whether they eat those seeds and those seeds come out later, whether those seeds cling on to their fur and are scattered, whether it's the wind or water that moves the seeds around, or maybe it's just as simple as a seed falling off a tree and landing on the ground. Scientists, as you look around your community, look at some plants around you. Make predictions. How did these plants get here? Did a person plant the seed? Did a seed maybe fall off a tree? You can start to make observations about plants and what they look like, and try to figure out or make an inference of how that seed or that plant got there. Scientists, I'll see you next week. We're getting ready to start quarter 2, which means we have way more science to talk about. I hope you have a great week.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power from Kansas City Public Schools, one of the science curriculum coordinators. I hope you had an awesome Halloween, but we're back with more science. So scientists, we're going to start with an activity or an experiment. So I have with me a softball. And scientists, I'm going to let go of this softball. Hands off. Scientists, when I let go of this softball, what do you think is going to happen? Take a second to make a prediction. When I let go of this softball, what do you think is going to happen? Make a prediction. Got your prediction? Okay, let's try it. Ready? Softball, letting go. What happened? Yeah, it fell to the ground. Let's try it again. Okay, scientists, this time I'm going to toss it up in the air. What do you think is going to happen? When I toss this ball up in the air, what do you think is going to happen? And no, I'm not catching it. I'm going to toss it up in the air and stand back. What do you think is going to happen to this softball when I toss it? Make a prediction. Got your prediction? Let's see. Was your prediction correct? Did the ball fall to the ground like you said it was going to? Scientists, do you know why the ball fell to the ground? When I dropped it, it fell to the ground. And even when I threw it up in the air, when I had it going in a different direction, it still fell to the ground. Do you know why? Well, today, scientists, we're going to talk about why. And that why is gravity. Gravity is a force between two objects. So, if I get the softball again, in our experiment here, it was the force between the softball and the earth. Yeah, like the whole earth, not just where I'm standing. It's a force that pulls objects to the center of the earth. Now, standing below me is the ground, right? But if we got rid of the ground, this ball would keep dropping to the center of the earth. Now, when I say center, I realize that can be a little misconstruing, meaning it can be confusing. On this picture, you'll see that there are 4 stick people. And those 4 stick people have each dropped a red ball. And you'll see that red ball is falling towards the earth. Now, scientists, when it hits the ground, it's going to stop. But when I say that things are pulled towards the center of the earth, they're not pulled to the middle of the ocean. That's not the center of the earth we're talking about. We're talking about the core, the very, very middle. So if I cut open this softball, there'd be different layers in it. And if I cut it open, the very, very center would be a core. It's a cork. And the earth is very similar. So here's a poster of the earth. The earth is a sphere, as we know, so it's round. So here's the earth. And in this picture, the earth has been cut away from the different layers. So we live on this layer called the crust. And that's the dirt, that's the mountains, the things that we see that we think of as the ground. Now below the crust, we have this area called the mantle. Okay? And inside of the mantle, you'll see that there's an inner mantle and an outer mantle. And it's made up of different materials. Now, as we work our way to the center, we call this the core of the earth. Now, the core of the earth is really, really hot, and it's made of different metals at liquid temperature. But we're not worried about that today. We're focused on gravity. What I want to get to at this point, scientists, is that when I say that things are pulled to the center of the earth, I mean they're pulled to the core. They're pulled to the very, very middle of the sphere. That's why when you drop something here in Kansas City, it falls down to the ground. If we were to take a plane flight and go to Brazil in South America, and I drop something, it's going to fall down to the ground. Even though we're up here in Kansas City and Brazil is down here. If we travel to West Africa, we may be over here, but if I drop something, it's still gonna fall down to the ground. The whole idea is that gravity is the force that pulls objects to the center of the earth. It's why you and it's why me stay on the ground as we walk. Now, in 1969, we had a team of astronauts that went to the moon, and they landed on the moon. And there's a very famous quote that says, "There's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Meaning that we had gotten to a new place. We had gone to the moon. We had gone somewhere that other people hadn't been yet. And that was a really big deal. But what's interesting about landing on the moon is that on the moon, you feel a whole lot different than you do here on Earth. If you ever get a chance to watch the video from the real astronauts in 1969 that landed on the moon, you actually see them kind of like floating. So they kind of are like walking, hopping like this. And it's not because this is how they walk. It's because that's the only way they could. Scientists, the gravitational pull, or the force of gravity on the moon, is not near as strong as it is here on Earth. So when you see those astronauts kind of floating, That's because the gravity is a lot less. The moon's gravity is not pulling the astronauts to stay on the ground like we are here on Earth. Now, something else is really interesting. And you can actually search this video on YouTube, or you can search it just using Google. But you can actually Google or search for an experiment that was done on the moon. Now, in 1969, the astronauts took a feather and a hammer up to the moon. Now, this is important because if I drop a hammer and a feather here on Earth, which one's gonna hit the ground first? Yeah, probably the hammer, because it's heavier. But actually, if I took out all the air, got rid of all this air, you can feel the air, right? If you fan yourself off. The air is actually what's causing the feather to float. If we got rid of the air, the feather and the hammer would fall at the exact same time. Exact same time. How crazy is that? Because the force of gravity is the same no matter what object is falling. No matter a feather, or a piece of paper, or a rock, or a bowling ball. The force of gravity is the same anytime it pulls something to the center of the Earth. Let's go back to the astronauts. 1969, astronauts are on the moon, and they decide to take with them a hammer and a feather because they want to prove that gravity is a constant, meaning that no matter what is dropped, the gravitational pull will be the same on every object. Now, the reason they were able to prove this to be correct is because on the moon, there's not really an atmosphere. So like, we're breathing in oxygen right now, there's all this air. Yeah, that doesn't happen on the moon. There's no air resistance. There's no air impacting how the feather is floating to the ground. So they have the feather, they have the hammer, and the astronaut lets go of both of them. And you're able to see on the moon, both the feather and the hammer drop at the exact same time. Because gravity on the moon, even though there's not as much as there is here on Earth, the gravity was pulling the feather and the hammer towards the center of the moon at the exact same rate. But we don't live on the moon, so let's come back to Earth. So scientists, let's talk about the history of gravity. So a really long time ago, there was this guy named Sir Isaac Newton. And he was a scientist. And Newton's actually really famous for his laws of motion, which we'll talk about later. But one thing that Newton figured out was this thing called universal gravity. And he figured out that items fall, or objects fall, to the center of the Earth. So we can thank Newton and the scientists that came before him for these laws that we understand today. So I have a book with me, and it's called Science Ideas in 30 Seconds. And I just wanted to give you, there's a section about gravity, and I just wanted to give you a really quick snippet or piece of information about Isaac Newton. So here we go. Gravity in 30 seconds. The ancient Greeks were certain that the Earth and the rest of the universe were made of different things and obeyed different laws. Right, so everything's different. But in the 16th century, that's the 1500s, a long time ago, scientists such as Galileo questioned this idea. And the view emerged that the same laws work all over the universe, which is why gravity here on Earth, the pull to the center of the Earth, is the same concept as the idea of gravity pulling the hammer and the feather towards the center of the moon. Now, Isaac Newton decided that the same law made apples fall to the ground, kept the moon close to the Earth, the law of gravity. Gravity attracts objects in space towards each other and pulls objects on the Earth towards the center of the planet so that things fall to the ground when they are dropped. Newton even worked out a mathematical version of his discovery and used it to predict the motion of the moon, comets, and planets. Today it is used to steer spacecrafts through our solar system and beyond. So scientists, because of a discovery in the 16th century or 1500s, we're still using that understanding today as we navigate space. So when we think about the new discoveries that they're finding on Mars, we can thank Isaac Newton for his understanding and development of the theory of gravity, the law of gravity, to allow our spacecrafts or our different robots to get there and land on Mars. So scientists, to recap, gravity is a force between two objects. So when I had my softball and I dropped it, it was the force or the attraction between the softball and the earth. Now, gravity can be as simple as keeping you and I on the ground, or it can be as complex as keeping the earth in its revolution, keeping Mars in its revolution, keeping Jupiter in its revolution, and holding everything in place where it needs to be. Gravity is at the center of everything. So scientists, keep a lookout. When you ever hear someone yell, "Heads up!" that means that something's coming down because of the force of gravity. I'll see you next week. Have a great day.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-5200.
Hello and welcome to KCPS Homeroom. This is Erica Mabian, your iSpark STEM coordinator in the CTE department. Today we're going to do part 2 of our infective detection. So get ready for the case of the junior scientist part 2. Alright, we are going to investigate how to protect ourselves from germs and to keep ourselves healthy. Today you are going to need a few supplies. So I'm going to give you the list now so that you can gather them together and be ready for our experiment. You're going to need some glitter, liquid soap, a bowl of water, some lotion, and you'll have all the things you need. Maybe you want to get a towel just in case you make a mess. Now, for our objective today, we're going to think about how to identify the disease agents that are causing the simulated disease outbreak. So yes, we're going to do a simulation today. And we're going to use our scientific thinking to deduce a likely way to prevent that infection. Do you have some ideas about how you can prevent infection already? I bet you do. Let's keep going, scientists. All right, we're going to start with our vocabulary words. Our scientific vocabulary words help us use the right context when we are talking about our science and how it's used and how we can prevent those types of things. So here's our first word. Our first word is susceptible. That means the person who is able to become infected or sick by the communicable disease. So most people are susceptible. Sometimes if you get a flu shot, that makes you less susceptible to getting the flu because you got the flu shot, and that helps you not get the flu, or it helps it to not be as bad. So our first word is susceptible. Next we have infected. Infected is a person who has the communicable disease. So if you have the flu has infected your body. Last, communicable disease. Communicable disease is when it is spread from person to person or animal to animal. Maybe you have a pet or you live on a farm, or it could be on a surface, and that's how you will get the communicable disease and how it passes and you catch it. Now, let's think about how germs are spread. There are a lot of ways that germs are spread. Maybe someone sneezes or coughs and they don't cover very well. I like to put my sneezes or coughs inside my shirt because I know that I'm not spreading it to anyone. Sometimes when we use our elbow and when we use our hands, those germs are really tricky and they spread out through there because we're not getting a good solid cover. Or possibly when we do that, we've got some germs on our fingers after. A second way, I know sometimes we don't think about it. Maybe our eye itches or our eyelash gets in the way and we rub our eyes, but that is another way that we get or spread germs. And last, we do a lot of touching with our hands. Our hands touch ourselves, our hands touch each other, our hands touch lots of surfaces, and those are the places that we can catch germs. But that's okay because we're going to be infection detectives and we're going to learn how to fight those germs. All right, so it's time for our experiment. I'm so excited to show you this experiment and I bet you will enjoy doing it at home. So, the first thing you need is glitter. We all love glitter. It's sparkly and shiny and it gets everywhere, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So the first thing you need to do is have your agent of contraction. And what we're going to use is lotion. So I'm going to put a little lotion on my hand and rub it around so we have an agent of contraction. So now it's ready to contract the disease. The disease we're going to use is the glitter. So I'm going to place a little glitter on my hand and spread it out so it can simulate how we catch our disease. So here is our disease or our germs. Our germs are spread all over. It stays with us. It flies all around whenever you are going somewhere. If you touch a surface, then all of a sudden that surface has the germs. So just think about that whenever you are going about your day and you're doing different things and how you can be an infection detection scientist. So now we have our germy hand. How do we get those germs off of our hands? Can you think of a way? Can you think of a way? Can you think of a way? I bet you can. Yes, wash our hands. So what I'm going to do is get a little bit of soap, place it on my hand. I'm going to start rubbing it in advance so that I can loosen up those germs and get them ready to leave. When you're washing your hands, you want to make sure you wash in between your fingers. You want to scrub the palm of your hand and the backs of your hands. And you want to scrub your fingernails and your wrists and get all of the germs off. While you're washing your hands, you want to think about singing the happy birthday song 2 times. I know you know the happy birthday song, so I'm not going to sing it for you. But I am going to simulate washing my hands and getting off the germs. So I have a basin of soapy water and I'm going to start rubbing and scrubbing and trying to get those germs off. And if you notice, I'm using my fingernails to do some scrubbing, and that helps loosen up those germs and get them off of my hands. And I'm going to do both hands so that I have super clean hands. I'm rubbing in between. I'm rubbing for my fingernails to get clean. I'm rubbing on my wrists so my wrists get clean. I'm going to do the backs of my hands and get all of those germs off. And you should do this for how long? Yes, 2 times singing happy birthday. And when you're all done, look, all the germs are washed away. And I happen to see the germs in the bottom of this bowl. So when you do that experiment, you'll be able to see those germs wash away too. Normally, when we have real germs, we can't see them. So this simulation is a great way for you to really know what it's like to wash your germs away. It's a way for you to really see how those microorganisms, they're teeny tiny germs, are on your hands and on your surfaces when you are doing everything about your day. When you touch things, when you hold hands, maybe you rub your eyes because you may be tired, maybe you're using a pencil or touching a doorknob, and they're just everywhere. But how we stay safe is having good hand washing techniques. So let's keep going. It's time for our story, our PLTW story. Let's see what happens to Milo, Susie, and Angelina. Sick Susie. She is not feeling well today. She has some symptoms. She's coughing. I notice she has a wet towel on her head, and I bet that's because she's feeling warm or has a fever. And she told her mommy that she had a sore throat. So those are her symptoms right now. Some preventive measures that she tried, but while she was feeling sick, is she covered her cough and she used some hand sanitizer. So good job, Susie, on trying to help prevent germs. Next, we have the classroom. There's Milo and Angelina. They are worried. I know they're worried, but because I can see the expression on their face. These students decided to run a simulation to demonstrate the criteria and constraints for spreading and eliminating germs. So let's talk about the criteria of spreading and eliminating germs. So the criteria for spreading germs are, you're going to touch lots of surfaces all the time. And when you touch those surfaces, you're probably going to get some germs. But I bet the constraints of that is that you know ways that you can eliminate those germs, things that you can do to be a germ fighter and help yourself stay healthy. So, scientifically speaking, when we think about having germs or preventing germs, Milo and Angelina came up with a plan. The students are going to investigate how germs are spread. They're going to watch and take notes. Maybe they're going to put it, I bet they're going to put it in their scientific notebook and make a chart. They're going to simulate proper hand washing techniques and how to eliminate germs. I bet they're going to check, for one, if someone does the whole hand washing for the entire time that they sing the happy birthday song 2 times. I bet they're going to check to see if they use a towel to turn off the faucet. I bet they're going to check to see if they use a towel to shut the door or open the door. Now let's see. How should Milo and Angelina protect themselves from getting sick? What are some things that they could do? I bet that they could get rid of germs by cleaning their surfaces, washing their hands, and eating and staying healthy by having fresh vegetables and fruits and drinking plenty of water. All of those good things that we do for our body help protect us and help us get rid of those germs. So, remember to wash your hands correctly. Step 1, you're going to turn on the faucet. Step 2, get some soap. Rub the soap on the palms of your hands, on the backs of your hands. Make sure you clean your wrist, in between your fingers, and your fingernails. Rub and scrub for the duration of singing the happy birthday song 2 times. I bet that at that point you're ready to rinse. Rinse off all the soap, then get a towel and turn off the faucet with that towel. Dry your hands nice and well and use that towel to use it for the door if you need to open it. Then you may throw that towel in the trash. At that point, you have gotten rid of all the germs from your hands and you are ready to be a scientific infection detection scientist. All right, so let's review all the things you learned today. We investigated how to protect ourselves from germs and how to keep us healthy. What did you do to do all of those things to keep you healthy? I bet that you are going to conduct this experiment at home and practice finding out how you can keep those germs away. The first thing you need for your experiment is going to be your germs. Your germs are glitter. You can use any color. I just happened to pick red because I thought that would be cool for today. You may decide if you're doing this experiment with other people that each person could get a different color glitter. Go around and touch a few surfaces and see how that glitter is spread. It will simulate the spreading of germs. You will also notice that when you have that glitter, it is just like those microorganisms or those small particles of germs. Some are large and some are so tiny that you cannot see with your own perfect eyes. Next, after you have your germs, you want to wash your hands nice and thoroughly. While you're scrubbing, you'll see how hard it is to get those germs off. Remember to scrub and rub all of those good places, our wrist, in between our fingers, the palms of our hands, the backs, and our fingernails. Those are all good places that germs like to hide. And as scientists, we know that we can get rid of them by using a good amount of soap and water. And finally, make sure you're washing for that whole time of singing the happy birthday song 2 times. Use that paper towel to turn off the faucet and open the door, and you will be in a very good germ fighter. That has been our episode of Infection Detection Super Scientists. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Erica Mabian. I'm the iSpark STEM coordinator for Kansas City Public Schools. Have fun with your scientific experiment.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Jones again. And just like with the weeks before, we're going to be picking up our conversation about atoms to ecosystems. But this time, we're going to move from our discussion of the actual atoms and molecules to the reactions. Now, as always, we have to go over the standards that we're going to be covering. And just like before, we have our middle school standards as well as our high school standards. And they tie together. Here's what I mean. When we look at our middle school standards, what we're looking at is the relationship between photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and talking about the role that they play in moving matter and energy throughout ecosystems and through organisms. When we look at high school, however, we get more detail, more in depth into the actual process. So for high school, we're looking at how photosynthesis transforms light energy into chemical energy, and how cellular respiration will reprocess, reorganize molecules in such a way that you're able to break them down and create energy from this new compound that we're going to form called ATP. Okay? So first, let's start with photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? Well, if you break it down, first of all, photo means light. When we look at synthesis, here's what we're talking about. We're looking at either recombining or the combination of parts of elements to form a whole. So in photosynthesis, what we're doing is using light energy to make a molecule from individual atoms. All right? Or we're using light energy to take atoms, rearrange them to make new compounds. So in this case, we're using, like I said, light energy to give us carbohydrates, which are sugars. So that's really what photosynthesis is. All right? Now, when we look at carbohydrates, we have to figure out, okay, well, what's in a carbohydrate? Well, think of it like this. I really enjoy carne asada burritos, all right? And if you look at a carne asada, you already know. So, you got the yellow rice, you got the white rice, you have the beans, you have the steak cut up, you have cilantro, you have all of these things that come together to give you this perfect dish. Well, when you look at carbohydrates, it's similar in that even if you're talking about glucose, which is a simple sugar, or sucrose, which is a little bit more complex, or even starch, which is a very complex sugar, you're dealing with the same 3 elements. Those are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So again, when we're looking at carbohydrates, we have our carbon, we have our hydrogen, and we have our oxygen. And what you find is that everything, regardless of whether it's a sucrose molecule or whether it's starch, it starts with glucose. So this is one reason why when we're talking about the equation that gives us, or the equation of photosynthesis, we're looking at how glucose is formed. Okay? Now, where do we get the atoms that we need from glucose? Because here's the thing. If you recall, there's a law, conservation of mass. Here's what that law states. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed. You can just transfer it from one form to another. Okay? Grandpa used to say, you gotta have money to make money. Same kind of thing. You're not going to make atoms out of thin air, and you're not going to take atoms and just destroy them where they no longer exist. So when we look at this process of photosynthesis, the process of making glucose, we have to get those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms from somewhere. Where do we get them from? Well, if you're looking at this, we get our carbon and some of our oxygen from carbon dioxide. We get our hydrogen and even more oxygen from water. So what we're saying is we get the carbon, the hydrogen, and the oxygen we need to make sugar molecules from carbon dioxide and water. Now, when I say we, I'm not talking about every organism, only those that can carry on the process of photosynthesis. So, it's like a balancing act. Okay? Here's what I mean. Notice, glucose has 6 carbons. So, if you look at carbon dioxide, which only has 1 carbon, how many do you need? 6. Glucose has 12 hydrogens. If you look at water that has 2 hydrogens, how many do you need? 6. That's the balancing act here. You got it? It's just like math. 2 plus 4 equals 6. On both sides of that equal sign, you have the same quantity, although it's arranged in different numbers. Okay? Now, let's talk about the equation versus the actual process. Here's what I mean. So, for a lot of you, you remember this equation. And I'm talking about all the way down like, elementary school. Photosynthesis, carbon dioxide plus water plus light gives you glucose and oxygen. Yeah, that's great. But I'm going to tell you right now, for those of you who are in an accelerated class, and especially those of you who are taking bio, you see this. And you're like, wait a minute. How do these two relate? Well, here's how. This is the equation for photosynthesis. But that is the actual photosynthetic process. There's a difference, okay? Remember, carne asada, right? So that's the final product. But to make this, first of all, you got to have like 3 hours of active time. That means like you're actively cooking, which means if it takes 5 total, you have 2 hours of just prep. Yes. Then let's talk about the ingredients. Well, this is what you need just to get the meat right. This is what you need just to get the beans right. These are the ingredients you need just to get the rice right. And we're not even talking about the cilantro, the tomatoes, the tortilla, the guac, the sour cream. I mean, you follow what I'm saying? So sometimes we teach you the equation to whet your appetite. But we got to teach you the process for you to make the meal. Okay? So, in looking at photosynthesis, as I said, here's our equation, which everybody knows. But I'm going to tell you, if you're in high school, you need to learn the process. So, let's talk a little bit about terminology. Because here's where a lot of people get thrown off with photosynthesis. We throw out a lot of terms that actually mean the same thing, you just don't know it. For example, we have this thing called light-dependent reactions. And then we have this other thing called light-independent reactions. Okay? Think of light-dependent reactions as the photosynthetic reactions that need light. Light-dependent. Think of the ones that are independent as the photosynthetic reactions that can be done in the dark. So you have a light reaction and a dark reaction. Now, some of you guys know these terms, but others are like, wait a minute, somebody told me about a photosystem. Let me show you where that rolls into play. So when you look at your light reaction, it's actually broken up into two smaller reactions, photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. And to make matters even more complicated, photosystem 2 occurs before photosystem 1. Think about it like the one that they figured out first and then the one that they figured out after. It's kind of like the Star Wars movies, right? So when I was a kid, I saw Star Wars, right? And technically, it starts at episode 4, but you don't know that, especially in the 70s. Then they went back when you came into the 90s and started with like, oh, now we're at episode 1. And we're like, well, wait a minute. You mean the first one was the fourth one? Yeah. Same kind of deal. All right? With your dark reaction, the other name for the dark reaction is the Kelvin cycle. Now, I'm not going to swear that the guy who's figured this out was named Kelvin, but, you know. Here's what I want you to remember or keep in mind. The light reaction uses light energy or electromagnetic waves. We're talking about, either sunlight, light from, lamps, things of that nature. And it uses that to form or create our chemical energy. So we're using photons to start this reaction. Okay? On this side, we're using chemical energy in the form of ATP to start that reaction. So with the light dependent, you need light. With the dark reaction or independent, you just need ATPs. Okay? Cool. So when looking at this in its totality, the entire thing, we have two sides of the house. We have the light dependent side and we have the light independent side. With the light dependent side, you see you got photosystem 2, photosystem 1. And what we're talking about is this side is where we convert water into oxygen. Then this side of the house, which is the Kelvin cycle, is where we convert carbon dioxide into our sugar. So if you're looking at this, you'll notice, okay, I got it. There's two processes. That's how we get the equation. Part of the equation deals with this side of the house. The other part of the equation deals with this side of the house. Okay? So, now that we have sugars, when I come back to you next week, we're going to really be talking about what we do with those sugars. Because again, like I said, going back, photosynthesis goes from carbon dioxide here to glucose. But now that you have glucose, what are you going to do with it? And that's where our discussion will pick up. I hope you guys have a great week. And when we come back, we will discuss where we go from here. Have a great day.